Hey guys, today's lesson, we're still going to be graphing equations, but today's lesson is doing it a different way. We're going to be graphing these equations using intercepts. So let's just say for a second I had an equation y equals x plus 1. What we've learned already to do is to make an xy table, all right, or an input-output table, and we chose numbers for x like 0, 1, and 2. And then we would put each one of these in for x. So if I put 0 in for x, it becomes 0 plus 1 is 1. If I put the 1 in place of x, 1 plus 1 is 2. Put the 2 in place of x, 2 plus 1 is 3. And then we would graph these things. Okay? Now, I'm going to clear the ink, but the graph that we would get here, all right, the graph that we would get is we would end up getting, it was 0, 1. When I plugged the 1 in, it was 1, 2. When I plugged the 2 in, it became 2, and then we got 3. And then we would be able to graph our line like so. Okay? Well, here's what's happening today is, all right, that's one way to graph equations is to make an XY table or an input-output table. But there's another way to do it, and that's called using intercepts. All right, there are two intercepts here, an x-intercept and a y-intercept. And really what these are talking about, the x-intercept is the x-coordinate of a point where a graph crosses the x-axis. When I look at my blue line here, I want to say, well, where does it cross the x-axis? Remember, this one's the x-axis. Okay, so where does the blue line cross it? Well, right here at this red dot, which we know that point is -1, 0. That is what we call our x-intercept, because that's where it crosses the x-axis. All right. On the other hand, then, our y-intercept is where it's going to cross the y-intercept, or where it's going to cross the y-axis. So that's going to be right here, because this is our y-axis. Where does that blue line cross? Well, right here, and that's at the point 0, 1. That one is our y-intercept right there. Now, what we're going to do today, instead of making our xy table and having all those points, we're just simply going to look for these 2 points, because if I can figure out what the x-intercept is and what the y-intercept is, if I get those 2 points, then I can just use my ruler, connect those 2 points, and we're done. All right, the key to doing this is right here. Notice on my x-intercept that number is a 0 for y. Okay, so all I have to do is plug that 0 into the equation, and I'd be able to figure out what the x is that goes with it. And same thing with my y-intercept. Notice right here, the key is that number is a 0, my x-coordinate in that case. So if I plug 0 in place for x in an equation, I'm going to end up getting 1. And just to show you again, here was our equation, x plus 1. Well, what happens if I plug 0 in for x? Okay, you end up getting that y is 1. So what we would say is when x was 0, y became 1, and that's how we figured out what point that was. Okay, same thing with the other one then. So now I plugged 0 in for x for that one. Let's plug 0 in for y in this case. So then here's my equation, and I can solve that by subtracting 1 and getting that -1 equals x. So that says -1 is x, and remember I plugged 0 in for my y. That's how I got that one. So all I'm doing is solving the equation twice. First I put 0 in for x and see what I get. Then I put 0 in for y. See what I get. That's how I'm going to figure out my 2 intercepts, and away we go. Okay, here's example 1. We'll do this one together, and then I will turn you over to do example 2. So the first one says, example 1, find the intercepts of the graph. 3x minus 2y equals 6. Then use the intercepts to graph the equation. So here's the equation, 3x minus 2y equals 6. Okay, as I said, all I'm going to do is plug 0 in. First for x and get an answer, and then I'm going to plug it in for y and get an answer. So I always start with the x. So let's plug a 0 in for x. And then we're going to solve the equation for y to see what goes with it. So in this case, 3 times 0 is 0. That leaves me with -2y equals 6. We divide by the -2. Divide by -2 to tell me that y equals -3. So again, think about this as a point. When I chose 0 for x, my y became -3. Okay? So there is my first. That is my first intercept. And that's because I'm finding y here. This is what we call my y-intercept. That's where it's going to cross the y-axis. All right, well, then I have to do the problem again. 3x minus 2y equals 6. Well, last time I put it in for x, this time I'm going to plug my 0 in for y. So it becomes 3x minus 2 times 0 equals x. And again, negative 2 times 0 is 0. That leaves me with 3x equals 6. Divide by 3. That gives me x equals 2. So again, for an ordered pair, well, I put 0 in for y, and I figured out that my x was going to be 2. This is my x-intercept. And now all I have to do is graph those two things. So on the next page, I have my graph paper. Remember we had our y-intercept, which was 0, negative 3, and I had my x-intercept, which was 2, 0, I believe. Let's look back. Yep, 2, 0. All right, so I got to graph these 2 points. 0, negative 3, okay, 0 right and left, down 1, 2, 3 is right here. That is my y-intercept, because that's what's going to cross the y-axis. The 2, 0 is 2 to the right, 0 up and down. There is my x-intercept, because that's where it's going to cross the x-axis. Now I do is use my ruler and connect the dots. And that's how we use intercepts to graph our equation. All right, we're just solving the problem twice, using 0 for x the first time, using 0 for y the second time. All right. So, I had an extra graph in there, don't need that. Here you go then. Here's one for you. So it says graph 4x plus 2y equals 12 using intercept. So I'm going to let you pause the video and then go ahead and give it a try. First find your intercepts, then you may graph the equation. So pause the video. Okay, hopefully you're back. So I'm going to use this equation, 4x plus 2y equals 12. First thing I'm going to do is plug 0 in for x. Plus 2y equals 12. The 4 times 0 will go away. That's why it's so easy to do it. You're using 0. That leaves me with 2y equals 12. We're going to divide by 2, which tells me that y equals 6. That's my y-intercept. That's where it's going to cross the y-axis, all the way up at 6. Okay? Now I have to do this again. 4x plus 2y equals 12. But since I put it in place of x before, this time the 0 goes in place of y. 0, not plus, equals 12. This 2 times 0 goes away, giving me 4x equals 12. We're going to divide by 4 to give me x equals 3. It's going to cross the x-axis, intercept. It's going to cross the x-axis at 3. I can do my graph paper right here if I wanted to. Okay, my y-intercept is up at 6, so I count on the y-axis up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's where the line's going to cross my y-axis. Okay, my x-intercept was at 3, 1, 2, 3. That's where it's going to cross the x-axis. And now all I have to do is connect my dots using a straight line. Of course, you're going to use a ruler, so it's perfectly straight. And it's going to end up looking something like that. Yours is going to be much straighter than mine, though, because you're using a ruler. That's it. Finding the intercepts. That's our lesson for today.